Hi, I'm Anthony Originello, CEO of the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources for BC and Yukon. We represent more than 8,000 members, and as the organization dedicated to advancing the HR profession through education, advocacy, awareness, professional development, as well as our recognized and impactful CPHR designation, we are proud to be a sponsor of this show. We have been the voice of the HR profession since 1942. Learn more about us at cphrbc.ca.
In this episode of Careers That Matter, I am joined by Michael Geller. You've probably heard his name if you're in real estate circles or Vancouver politics over the years. And he's going to give us a look into what he does for work and his career path. Michael, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're everywhere, and I'm not clear exactly on how you define what your job is.
Okay.
What is your job?
Well, my job has changed over the decades. I started off as an architect. I was a registered architect, and initially in a private practice. I then joined the government. I worked for CMHC for 10 years, and I highly recommend to anyone who wants to get into real estate development to spend some time in government, because that's how you get an appreciation what the public purpose is all about. While I was at CMHC, I was encouraged to become a planner, so I became a registered urban planner. And after I left CMHC, I joined a private development company and became known as a developer. That company went broke in 1983. While most people are put out of business by receivers, I was set up in business by receivers. And 3 receivers hired me at one point, all 3 paying me for the same project at the same time. But that then led me to set up my own firm providing real estate consulting services to developers and governments, and basically whatever I learned from government, I would sell to the development industry and vice versa.
But you became politically active as well.
I think when you're involved in real estate, you can't ignore politics. I was always interested in it, but it wasn't until 2008 when Peter Ladner was thinking about running for mayor, and we went and had lunch. He was thinking of running as an independent, and I discouraged him from doing that because I told him the only 2 independents that I knew who could get elected were Carol Taylor and Mike Harcourt, and he didn't have the qualities of either of those people. And so he didn't run as an independent. He ran against Sam Sullivan, but he said, if I decide to run, will you run with me? And at the time, I had just spent a year traveling around the world. I didn't have a steady job, and so I ran for city council in the 2008 election.
So what does your job look like today? Like, if you can't, I know it's complex and you can't just say, well, one day represents everything.
No.
But let's take a week. Like, what are the kinds of things that you do over the course of a week?
Well, I continued to do a little bit of development for my own account. A partner and I own a mobile home park, which we're converting into a modular factory-built housing community. But I also consult to others in the development community who perhaps need advice on how to deal with the people at City Hall, or sometimes just what's the right type of product to build. I do a little bit of consulting as well to universities and who are looking at perhaps following what we did at Simon Fraser University, where we put a whole new community on land adjacent to the university campus. Today I was doing assessment appeals on behalf of clients, which is something I quite enjoy. So it is a variety. I also, as a result of my time at SFU, have an adjunct faculty appointment in the School of Resource and Environmental Management. And as you know, I dabble in journalism, and I love writing about planning and real estate, hopefully in a manner that intrigues people and helps them understand what's going on.
Well, it's such a complex portfolio. Do you ever stop working?
Well, I'm 77, and most of my friends and colleagues, not most, I guess, but certainly one of the golfing groups that I belong to, they're all retired. I'm one of the very few who's still working, even at that age group. No, I mean, I admire people the late Joe Siegel, the late Maury Wask. Those were people I worked with, and they just kept going until the very end. And hopefully I'll get to do that. I love doing what I do, so there's no real reason to stop. I still get to travel. As you know, I just came back from Japan to see a World Fair, which I would encourage everybody to go and see if they can this summer.
Well, I also see you post quite a bit about being at different real estate kinds of events, whether it's in Russia or Europe or Asia.
Yeah.
What is that just your interest, or are you being invited there as a speaker or a consultant?
Stu, I'm very full of myself, but I was impressed when I got invited to be a judge for a competition to build a new financial center for Moscow. And I was hired by the largest bank in Russia, Sberbank. And as a result of that exercise, I then got invited by other groups in different cities, in Rostov and Kazan. I found myself for 7 years. I was regularly commuting to Russia. Through that, I got hired by the city of Astana in Kazakhstan. I think there's a wonderful benefit of travel, and if you can combine travel and work, to me, that's the penultimate occupation.
No, you mean the ultimate. Penultimate is the least.
Oh, I mean the ultimate.
Yes.
There you are. I got to go back to school.
Well, let's go back to school. Where did you go to high school?
Toronto, Mackenzie Collegiate.
And you graduated in what year?
I graduated in '65 in a class where everybody was Jewish except for one person, and almost everybody in that class went on to university. And I think
did you?
I went on. Two of us went into architecture. Everybody else went into medicine and dentistry.
So in 1965, which is 60 years ago, were you saying, yes, in 2025, I'm going to have done all of this?
No.
Did you have a vision of what you were going to be?
I was going to be an apartment building developer. That was always my ambition. And it dates back to when my parents bought me something called Baco, which was a British equivalent of mini bricks. And all my life, I wanted to be a developer. And even when I was working at CMHC, the late Bill Terron, the president, said, Geller, one day you'll be a developer in Vancouver. And that was back in the 70s.
So what would you say is a personal characteristic or attribute that you've learned, that you have over the course of your career, that you think has been instrumental in you being able to have the success that you've had?
I'd like to think that I can see things from different perspectives. So when I look at a private development, some of my colleagues only see it in terms of the financial attributes of the project. And because I did spend 10 years in government and I did work as an architect, I'd like to think that I can also see that project from many other perspectives, not just the financial perspective, which is why I'm not as successful as many of my colleagues. But I like to think I enjoy the work just as much. But working, as I said before, working in the public sector, that gives you a different perspective. And I sometimes get reprimanded in meetings with staff because I'm siding with the city staff, not with my client. But it's because I can see those different points of view.
Having an open mind and broad perspectives.
The other thing I attribute the little bit of success I've had, my father introduced me to the writings of Edward de Bono when I was very young. He was the father of lateral thinking, thinking outside the box, as we call it today. And de Bono wrote over 50 books, and I've read many of them because it gives you, again, helping you to see things differently than everybody else. And people say, well, give me an example. Well, I say there's a friend of mine who bought a property in Southlands near where I live. And somebody said to him, why did you buy that? That's a nursery. It's not a real estate play. No, he said, that is a building site. It just comes with $65,000 worth of plants. And as soon as I sell those plants, I have a development site. So many people passed up on that opportunity because they said, I don't want to buy a nursery. He could see that it wasn't just a nursery. It was a building site that was going for less than a building site if it didn't have all those plants on it. And I like to think that's the way to see real estate. And the people I admire the most are the ones who can see an aspect to a property. Somebody said to me, why are you buying a mobile home? I mean, isn't that limiting? I said, it's a mobile home park today, but have you seen some of these beautiful manufactured home communities? I'm going to get approval to subdivide it into various strata lots, build homes that people can buy, and these will be homes that people can buy for a fraction of what they pay for conventional single-family houses.
Ah, that's entrepreneurial thinking in motion. Because I believe, to me, the definition of an entrepreneur is someone who says, oh, so those are the boundaries that I'm supposed to work in? Yeah, but if I kind of bend it this way and I stretch it out that way and I do this and twist it around a little bit that way, now suddenly it's an entirely different opportunity.
The other thing I've done, which I recommend to others, I've always kept a journal, a personal journal. I started it in 1968 when I moved to England and traveled through Europe. And the advantage of that is you can write out what you think is going to happen, and it gives you a chance to find out how often you're wrong.
Yeah, most of the time.
But also every once in a while you do appreciate that, yes, you were right. But I think keeping a journal, reading books about creative thinking, traveling, these are, I think, the ingredients of a successful career.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for inviting me.